Okay, so first thing we need like a baseline, and so I'm thinking it's more of just kind of like a graph kind of thing. Um, but it's kind of like it's more like this because it's partly a reputation system because if you don't have good reputation with a person, then I'm just gonna putting it into like terms to kind of like help explain it like points. If you do something they don't like, you would go down here into the negatives. You'd get into negative numbers. Hold on. I need to redo that. That was horrible. Better. Um, you would get into the negatives. You would probably get into the negatives. So, but if you did something they liked, then you'd probably get into the positives. So I'll just go back to the beginning. So if it's more kind of like that, then trying to figure it all out is a bit easier. But the thing is, I knew it wouldn't be as simple as that, and I knew it wasn't as simple as that. So I just kind of had to think, well, what would be more than that, or what would be like the next step or version of that, I guess. And it probably would have to be the fact that it's just because everybody is different. Some people like video games, so you'd get points if you play video games as well. Some people don't like video games, so then you'd go into the negatives. So it's more of like I think it's more of just kind of like you gotta find that middle ground. But it's not just up and down inside. It's not just up and down or side to side. It's all four corners, all four directions. There's a lot to it. And so for that reason, instead of just going up and down, it can go off into the side and dip and change. Because it's not like it's instead of thinking it as point by point, it goes all points are connected. Because here, let me explain this. Here, think of this scenario. You say, I don't like when like companies make tables with corners because like you can bump into them and hit them. And they agree. Say, oh yes, I do agree, and then you get points. So then, but so then later on or whatever, you move in together, or you get an apartment or whatever, or you're just looking at furniture and you see a table that is completely circular, but you say that you'd prefer one you'd prefer one with corners. Well, they're going to be confused because didn't you say that you didn't like the corners because you can bump into them and it hurt? So you would lose points. However, because of the fact that it's not that big of a deal, and also can be easily explained as, but for the aesthetic we're doing, I think it would be a bit better if we had a corner table and we could just put bumpers. But personally, I would prefer one that's circular. And so then you could probably redeem some of that. You see? Here, let me... We just had 2 points there. We had our initial point, the table preference, corners versus not. And then when you two actually are in like the realm of tables, and you say you'd rather have one with the corners, you go down because didn't you previously say that? So you're contradicting yourself, and especially if they agree with what you previously said and you change it, that would have a lot different and a lot more of an increased effectiveness because of the fact that they agree with you. If they're indifferent about it, like, oh yeah, that does make sense, but I'm not really too corners or not, doesn't really matter to me, then it wouldn't have as much effect as if they actually had an opinion. If they preferred corners and you said, oh, well, if you said, I like corners, and they disagreed and said, no, corners are good, or whatever the opposite would be, I forgot what you said, it would affect it a lot more and would automatically get you decreased or not. So it's less about the fact that it's less about that fact of, oh, disagree and agree. It's all connected. Because if you never said, oh, I like the fact that, oh, I like the, when, if you never said, I'm stuttering a lot, oh my goodness. If you said that, actually no, if you didn't say, man, goodness, if you never said anything about tables in the beginning, you skipped this whole thing. This never happened. You never mentioned that. And then when you went out looking, you would stay relatively the same. It wouldn't have much of an effect because you never really said that. And that is where the confusing part comes in. Because you don't know what their opinion is going to be. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what they're going to say. They don't know what you're going to say. So it's connected in that way of, it will be completely different by the slightest changes. You mention, I prefer corners on tables. That changes the outcome as if you guys look at tables together, because they're going to have the expectation that you don't like corners. So when you say, hey, I'm looking for one with corners, they're going to be confused and you're going to lose more points than if you simply just were open to all tables. Because if you're directly contradicting yourself, that would probably get you less, that would probably reduce your amount of points more than if you said, oh, it doesn't really matter to me as much in this instance. Because there's plenty of times where you can prefer something, but be perfectly fine with what you are given. I can say, I prefer this kind of table, but if we got that kind of table, I'd be indifferent about it. If it was my 100% choice, I'd choose this over that. But it's not, and it doesn't bother me that much, so we can go with that if you would like. And that's it's all connected in that way. The less it's all connected, the less effect it has negative. But the more effective it is if it's positive, if it's all connected. For that reason, it makes no sense. It makes no sense of why you would openly contradict yourself because of that fact. Why would you purposely go down if you knew that you weren't gonna actually, if you didn't really care that much? If you don't care that much about something in your first meeting for the first time, I would most likely let it slide. Because if you've been in a relationship for a while, it's been pretty good. You've had some rough moments, but it's not too horrible. And you're kind of at like you're right here. You're kind of at a flat point. You're just kind of relaxing and hanging out. Then, like, say it's been like a couple weeks, maybe a month or something. Then those little things become less effective because of the fact that it would only go down a little bit. But if it's just the beginning, you've only been like hanging out for a couple of days, those little things are going to have more of an effect because there's less to look back on. Like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, I don't really like that. Oh, that's good. That I like that. Nope, not. Oh, yeah, no, I'm not sure about that. You've got to make sure that you're keeping it both consistent, but also keeping track of what you've previously said. Because if you've got those negative points, you can't afford to go any more negative. And that's why that's why a lot of the times you've got to be less contradictory of yourself and maybe try not to go back on what you said, because the next point is everyone is different to the point to where you can say the wrong thing in the wrong instance and it goes all downhill. So it's because of that, you've got to factor in the fact that I've said fact too many times. If you think about it, you have to make sure that you have some form of understanding of the person. Because if you don't, you will go straight into the negatives and be done. It's not going to work out. Because you can have all the interests, all the agreements, you can have all of that. But if there's a couple things, you're not really going to get anywhere. It's just going to kind of be dipping here and there. Now, is there a way to just keep going up and up and up and up and up? Absolutely not. This isn't going to happen. Are there some people who have relationships like that? Yeah, and they do it for social media. But in reality, a lot of the times, you are going to have those bips and bumps and whatnot, and that's going to happen, but you're just going to kind of have to move on. So for the most part, most important part, I'd probably say, is have a decent understanding of the person so you can better conform to both their needs and what you're willing to provide in that sense, I guess. Because you can say something and get plus, but then if you contradict yourself, you can go into the negative. Because if they have that strong of an opinion on it. If you say, oh, I like this brand of tissue, they could love it and you're up in the positives. But if they have a really strong opinion on a different tissue brand, gone. Done. So you're just got to make sure that you can kind of, I guess probably the best way to do it is you've just got to be willing to agree with the fact that some things are going to have to be thought of in a different way for you to be able to progress. Otherwise, it's not, there's three ways it could go. It could either go good and stay decently relatively plus, or it can go not really that well, or it can stay in the middle. And it's good to have those moments where you guys aren't doing too well. Those are going to happen, and those aren't necessarily bad, in the sense that it allows you to see the person in a different environment. And so, in that sense, the only reason that you would want something that's kind of going along, just kind of like steady, you don't really want something that's just kind of here and there. And also, you don't want something that's constantly like changing like this. You wouldn't want something that's going up and down and up and down and up and down. Because if you do that, that means that there's a bunch of stuff that's going on that's not too favorable. There's a bunch of contradictions. There's a bunch of disagreements, but there's a bunch of agreements, and there's probably a lot of back and forth and a lot of stuff that's not going anywhere. And so for that reason, I probably, in the beginning when you're first getting to know that person, it's good to be having that stable up into the positives. It's good to have that, yes. But at the same time, having a bit of dips here and there, like this, isn't horrible. Because you get to see them in that way of, how do they handle that? Because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You can meet somebody who's really nice, who loves all the things you do, but if you say one wrong thing to them, they immediately go off and day's ruined for them, and it's just, their day is ruined. So that's the difficult part. You've got to make sure you understand the person enough to figure out where you are, because at a certain point you are going to kind of mellow out a little bit, and that's expected. Because at a certain point, you learn enough about the person to where you fully understand who and what they are. Will you ever truly understand a person? Probably not, because of that fact that there's just so much to a lot of people that it's just hard to get to know all of them. So you've just kind of got to figure out where you're at. Are you in that stage where you're kind of going up and up? Or are you in the negative where it's just kind of that dip? Or are you mellowed out? Because at a certain point, you are going to have to kind of figure out, what are you going to do next? You've always kind of got to think of the next day as well as the present. Because if you don't do that, because a lot of the times, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. You don't want to plan out like, oh, next month we're doing this. Unless it's like an event, you don't need to worry that far ahead. Unless it's like, oh, I got bills to pay in a month or two. That's important. You need to pay your bills. Or don't, I don't really care. But for the most part, you've got to figure out, okay, what to do next. I'm here. I'm right here. I'm doing pretty good. We got a lot of things in common. But what do I do next? I don't know what else to say. I don't know how to keep up the conversation. So, at this stage where you're not sure what to do next, you gotta leave it up to them. You gotta open them up. You have to make sure that, oh, what do you think about this? You gotta just start asking questions, doing stuff, getting them involved, so then you can figure out more. So then you can understand, okay, this is going good. Okay, yeah, this is working. Perfect. Okay, yeah, we're doing. And then it sort of mellows out. And sometimes going negative isn't always a bad thing, because you can have those big negative dips, and that's not because of what you did. Maybe you went off to college, or you went on like a trip or a vacation for like a month or two, and they miss you. I would probably consider that a negative, because if I'm really enjoying that person's company, then that's gonna not really do too well. And that's what long distance relationships are. Those are a lot more negative than positive, because of the fact that there's a lot less communication, understanding, and face-to-face confrontation. But that's a whole different topic of the types of relationships. We're just looking at relationship as like in general. So, for that reason, I would most likely just say, as kind of like a conclusion, is the steps that you need to do is get a decent understanding of the person, figure out who they are, and then at the same time, understand that no two people are the same, and there will never be 100% agreement. There will never be just purely up and up and up and up and up. This is never gonna happen. And if it does, they're lying. So, it's always gonna be rocky, it's always gonna be bumpy, but at the same time, it's just more of the fact that you've got to figure out, like, what is this person and what will their relationship with me look like? Because if you don't, then it's just going to be even more confusing for both you and that person. So, my final conclusion, I guess, would be, try to understand the fact that you don't understand. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.